So when I graduated from a rather prestigious school in 2008,
Loyola Marymount,
really great, wonderful school, loved and had a great education there, but I graduated in 2008 with the worst recession in history, and I really experienced and saw firsthand that just because you have a college degree, like, that does not guarantee you a job.
Yeah.
So, you know, my parents' generation, when they graduated from high school even, it was like you walk into a position and you climb the corporate ladder, and your first company is probably the company that you're going to retire with. And hearing him, it's like you think all these things and you're going through it and you're like, is it me? Is it me? There are like really no jobs. And then you hear someone like this who's been studying this and he even predicted
entire
this.
career.
Yeah. And it was like, wow, this is just a massive shift that's happening. And the part that I thought was really interesting is how the hiring process is really going to change also. So my background in like recruiting and talent development and all of that, it's so fascinating to really kind of think about the fact that GPAs and test scores and all of that is just going to be obsolete. And the questions and interview questions to really try to figure out if a candidate is going to be right are going to be so different. Yeah, so the kinds of talent that like you won't really be able to predict. So it's exciting.
It is exciting.
And a little terrifying, but
it is.
Yeah.
It is.
I do think people are going to have to adopt the skills of an entrepreneur in order to be successful in their professional career, especially when it comes to how they're going to make additional income, especially for my generation. And I think that's what income entrepreneurship really is. So, you know, taking on additional jobs on TaskRabbit or driving for Lyft, which I do, taking on contract work, etc.
Yeah.
Just being really crafty and clever into how you can really kind of earn money in untraditional avenues, other than just, you know, going into a job that's 9 to 5 and getting a paycheck. Like, how else can you make an income?
Absolutely, which is completely doable, to your point, with all of these, no pun intended, vehicles, pun intended, I guess, vehicles out there, like Lyft and Uber and whatnot. So why is that important to you, Skyler? Well, as a mid-20s, we'll say, year-old woman.
Yeah, so I think especially for me, because I do have my own business, but my business is not something that's sustainable yet. And I'm still figuring out, you know, how can I transition from a lifestyle business to something that is scalable. That concept alone is taking me like a long time to really figure out.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, you know, I've got an amazing part-time job.
Yeah.
And I also, you know, when I look at my accounts and I need a little bit of extra money, what can I do on the weekends or at nights? And that's how I found Lyft driving, and I started doing that, and it's really great because it's flexible. I work when I want to or when I can, and I'm not really required to show up at a particular time because my schedule's all over the place. Some days I'm out the door at 7, I don't come home till 10, and then some days I'm like, oh, I don't have to be anywhere till 3, so I could, you know, pick up a couple extra hours. It's so helpful, and I think the biggest thing for me is I'm really focused on creating a career. Like, I don't just want to have a job. If having a career that I'm passionate about and that is really deeply meaningful means that it's gonna take me 20 years to make $100,000 versus staying at a corporation that I could get there in, you know, 10 years or half the time, I'm going to choose the path that's unconventional so that I can have that meaning. And I think for the first, well, not the first time, but you know, this is kind of like an epidemic with my generation. Like, we're walking out into the workplace and figuring out, like, wait, what's going on here? Like, I have to do this for 45 years? Like, no way, no way, no way, no way. And I think this, you know, has a domino effect in, you know, us purchasing cars and buying homes. Like, that whole process is so delayed. Yeah, so I think that, you know, our generation is really kind of like disrupting a lot of different industries. And like I said, I think that that's a good thing, but I also think that that's kind of an unfortunate thing in some ways too.
It is what it is.
It is what it is, yeah.
I don't think it's unfortunate at all. I think, you know, the world changes. Shocker. Things change. Imagine that.
Yeah.
And it is what it is. And so I think what scares a lot of, or should scare a lot of employers, especially larger companies, is how are they going to engage the next generation, so to speak, of the workforce when no one wants to go sit in a cubicle anymore? And so thinking about how do you engage contract labor in just, again, a different way, and how you manage people. You mentioned that before. It's really interesting. Now, in this podcast, Tom Friedman also talks about upward, what is it again?
Oh yeah, jobs will be pulled up, out, and down.
Okay, so what is that?
I think he's just really talking about the trends in terms of employment, and that the opportunities, let's say now there are like 2 million jobs, well, in the next 5 years there's going to be like 500,000 jobs, because a third of them require like a very specific high skill set.
Yeah.
So they're the people that are creating the robots.
Yeah.
And then a third of that's going to be, automized or
Automated.
Automated, thank you. Like, hello, automized, I'm making up words here. So millennial of me. Automated. Or, a robot or a machine computer will take over, and then, the rest are being outsourced.
Yeah,
so,
overseas.
So the number of jobs in itself, there's really not that many out there, and that's why I think also, people are getting really crafty and original and creative and saying, well, I have to invent a job because I can't go find one.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting that one phrase that really stood out to me, and I think to you as well, is Tom Friedman in this, again, where you go to college doesn't matter. Spending $200,000 for college is not going to be attractive for folks in the future. And so, how do we handle that as a university system? I know I had this conversation with the University of San Diego recently, and they get that it's changing, but they are so mired in the way things were that,
oh goodness.
Yeah.
Education, like that whole realm, is so antiquated in so many ways. Like, even though there's online education and cool like education apps and technology, like that's only like skimming the surface.
Well, and they're just building on top of the old system.
Exactly.
It's like putting shiny new fancy apps on like an old way of thinking. I think it was this podcast, or maybe it was one of his others, where he talks about, like, why does a bachelor's degree have to be 4 years? Like, I get somebody made that up at one period of time, but the constraints of that seem just, they don't make sense anymore, frankly.
And it also seems like education now is actually more of a risk versus a guaranteed stock on the professional ladder. It's like, well, it's such a risk. That's a huge investment. That's 4 years of my life when I could have real world experience, applying that knowledge to any company. And you brought up a really good point earlier when you were talking about, it's not really about what you know.
Yes.
Anyone can get the kind of information that a professional or high school professional would have by hopping on to Google. For example, someone asked me to code their website. I don't know how to code. I looked online and I figured out how to do it, and then I made their website. So he didn't have to hire a web developer to do it. Granted, it could have been a lot better had someone do it, but I could have got it done. So even thinking about that,
and where somebody used to go to school for 4 years, at a private school, spending $200,000 to learn that skill set.
Exactly.
It's moot. And then we see folks coming out of school see this, and they don't have the real world skills that oftentimes you need. The interaction, the how to communicate with people, and
the follow up through, ambition, creating your own opportunity, all of those things that you're not really encouraged or really challenged to do in college. It's like someone gives you an assignment and then they tell you exactly how they want you to do it, and then you do it and turn it in, and then you get to the real world and it's like, this is the problem. What do you think is the solution? It's like, that's a totally different way of thinking, and one that we haven't been trained to do. For your whole life, 20 years you've been going through thinking the same way. So it's going to be really interesting to see what ends up happening to education and to the university system and all of that. So,
indeed. All right, more to come. Thank you, Tom Friedman.
Yeah.